He's also, as an avid historian, and has some wild stories of some of his tour, non-volunteer becoming a tour director stories. Going into the Soviet Union and having an accent, like, whoa, stuff like that's pretty wild. But anyway, Pete is quite a historian, and tonight he's going to share one of his favorite subjects, and that is ghost towns. And ghost towns that I've known. Here is Pete Wyman.
As you mentioned, I led a tour through Europe, and we were in Warsaw, visited the old town. Well, it wasn't the old town. It, of course, was blown up by the Nazis during the Second World War. But they rebuilt it just exactly like it was. Because that's their soul, you know, where they came from. And so I guess that's how I kind of got, well, I was always interested in history. And And so that's one of the things I want to talk about is preservation of these ghost towns. There's three basic definitions. They're a complete ghost town, and I'll show you some. No one lives there anymore. Sometimes there's nothing there, but I'll show you the best ones in the West. I'm going to concentrate on Idaho and somewhat Montana and eastern Washington. There are some good ghost towns on the other side of the mountains. The best one is Fort Gamble. Over there on the Olympic Puget Sound, it used to be a company town, and so basically everything's there. Now, people do live there. The second definition are partial ghost towns, where you have a few people living there, but maybe it was a town of 5,000, or the biggest city in the Northwest, the 1860s, is Idaho City, about 21 miles from Boise. They said it's around 20,000, certainly in the valley. At any rate, however, people live there. It's the county seat of Boise County. And for years and years and years and years, they only had about 400 people. Now I think more people, as the wealthy start buying up these homes and so on, are moving in the area. And of course, the final definition are tourist towns. Virginia City, Nevada is about the best example, but we have some. Well, Fort Gamble is a tourist city, and there's several in Montana. Okay, I want to start with some slides. By the way,
try this thing off.
I'm going to start with the last, only because I happen to have these pictures, which I'm trying to donate to a museum in Nome. These have to be Nome. Normally I would not, that's not within our area, getting there very easily. But every family has probably a crazy uncle and maybe a black sheep of the family. Well, this is a black sheep of the family. He went up to Alaska to strike it rich, and he didn't. From the pictures, I finally figured out they were Nome. But you'll notice this is the beginning of Nome. It's along the beach. One of the reasons these towns disappear is they start as tents. That's going to go on the slideshow. That's going to reverse. bunch of arrowheads and so on and so forth. At any rate, we're going to look at, the only reason I brought it up was just to show how towns start. That's Eagle, Kingston, Milling. That is West Coast towns. You're almost, okay, go to the next one. Okay, so you're ready to go. You can change it. Okay, that is known about 1905 during the 4th of July. You can see new buildings have gone up. Okay. There's an example of, this is all sluice box, all what we call
So I think you need to take it down because you've got to go in that automatic.
Anyway, the next place I want to go to is Dia. It's right next to, mine's blanked out, I love it. Brought all this stuff and forgot my notes. Anyway, Dia was the beginning of the trail where you see these thousands of people, long line going up over. The Indians said that's not a very good pass. Of course, what do they know? Surprise, surprise, landslide came down and took it out. And so then everyone moved over to Skagway. I didn't show any pictures of Skagway. It's a good place to go to by vessel. But I want to move to Canada. Somebody familiar with Kootenays? This is that's the slideshow. Maybe I should just show all the slides and talk about it. Anyway, the Kootenays, if you go up to Preston, you can either go up, well, about three or four different ways. But at any rate, you'll notice, maybe 2 minutes, much stuff, but at any rate, this is all along Kootenay Lake. You can go up, there's little art galleries. It's a great trip. It takes a ferry boat over Ainsworth Hot Springs, and then it goes over and it crosses, and then you come down, let's see what the Arrow Lakes, eventually end up at Nelson. Well, all that area between is one of my favorite ghost towns. As soon as we get to it, and then Sandon.
Are you ready to go beyond this slide?
Pardon me?
You ready to go to the next slide?
Yeah, many. Okay, stop there just for a second. That is correct. Incorrect. It's Dia. The Park Service did a lot of excavations there. It was a large town. Next. And that's all they found under the undergrowth. You could, the streets are all laid out, and you can see where houses used to be. That's the only thing left. Next.
Next. I don't know if you can hear you. Next.
It's hard to see, but up there in the left-hand corner, the problem with Dia was to get the ships there. It's about a mile long. It's a meadow to get to the town. So everything had to come down that big long pier. This is all the travelers coming up to Dia next. That's at the beginning of the pass. But as I say, everybody eventually moved over to Skagway. Next. Okay, this is Sandon. You can see it was a fairly developed town. It's kind of until I stop you. Yeah. Anyway, it was about 7,000 people, that on weekends they could get 11,000. There are all kinds of, mostly lead, silver, zinc mines, which is what this is up here. It's a great place to visit. Next. I want to talk about for a minute. They took 3 streams way above the city. It's nothing but a mountain, a very narrow canyon. In fact, on this book, you passed around, that's what Sandon looked like. You notice floods, fire, just about everything took it out. It is open during the summer, but this was my favorite. Some guy, he started about 17, too young to work in mines, and he ended up at the power station. The streams were blocked up above the top of the hill, and it all came through here. If you like machinery, this is the oldest continuous operating power plant in, or that type of power plant in Canada. The interesting thing when they made it, because they're in the middle of Nowheresville, was they made it so you could repair it on site instead of having to write and send something from Montreal. Imagine doing something like that today. Well, there's no need. We have airplanes and all kinds of things like that. It has never been closed down. I have a picture that had a huge gas operated as a backup, but they never had to use it. Anyway, the guy that's been the head of this, that run it for 50 years, is still there. So that was kind of highlighted. Okay, this is my next place is Liberty, Washington. That's one of the best ghost town or best gold mining towns in the state of Washington. Now, in this case, it's just a tiny town. The people themselves have taken these buildings, fixed it up. There's a little museum in the old fire station.
Where's Liberty?
Oh, Blewett Pass.
Where?
Blewett Pass.
Blewett.
That's the pass that runs between Snoqualmie and Stevens.
Okay.
It was famous for a wire gold. I saw some of this, I don't know, 50 years ago when I first went up there next. But you can see the beautiful shapes. Okay, now I want to go up to the Okanagan. There's several to be seen, Loomis, Nighthawk. This is Nighthawk. There was a big mine there. Next, just kind of go on through. There's not much to see. There was a mine. Cheesaw. Wait a minute, that's out of order. I'll come back to that. Well, that's Molson. The best ghost town in Washington is Molson. It's up there on the border. Just keep on moving that slide. Keep going. That used to be the bank. Inside of a building, there was also a meat market there. I like this, and there's a bunch of other ones. I like this one because the old timer out there. This is, yeah, I forgot my name. You're not going to remember it anyway. Cedar, well, it's not Bodie. It's Torek. Anyway. This is up near the Canadian border. I have several of them marked. What you need, if you're going to really do ghost towns, you need to get these. I have yellowed them. I could get my glasses and tell you what town it is. But there's a bunch of them up there. Near the Canadian border. Cheesaw, that's right. Cheesaw. But I like that other one. That's a classic dying town. The old man. That's Toronto. Keep going. Bodie. All of these are up, I have them marked on that big map. If you look carefully, there are little dots, which means it was a town or sometime it was a physical location. And, you know, I didn't think anything of them, but most of them had some reason for being once upon a time. Now, if you follow the railroad tracks, even the abandoned ones, there's little squares. These were the rail where you could pick up the train. That's how you got here. People up around Buckeye, which is north of me on the little Spokane, you didn't take your horse downtown or your carriage. Sometimes when you did, you just grabbed the train. Anyway, these towns, there's plenty of them around here that have disappeared. Next. This one showed up in the inland there. In fact, it's there in the front of it. Govan. Inside of it is next. That's the old school. You can see they tore up the railroad track. There's a couple of houses and so on. It had an interesting history, but appeared an agricultural town. I didn't even know it existed. Next. Get my glasses in case I need them. This is a little interesting. A friend of mine took me up the Ponderay River. You don't think much of it, but that is a log flume. Next. That's concrete. Next. It's a Diamond City. I had this on a map years and years and years and years ago. Finally, a friend knew exactly where it was and took me there. That's the only thing left is the chimney from one house. There's some big concrete abutments where they picked up the logs, sent them, I figured out it was about 3 miles, up over the mountain, across the Ponderay River, which is a large river, over to the other side where the railroad siding was. Now, it was owned by Diamond International, which made wooden matches. That one we noticed by, that used to be the ferry that went from Ruby across the Ponderay River. And of course the river has gone up because of the dams and so forth. By the way, that's an excellent trip. There's all kinds of dams to see, especially when you get up a Boundary Dam and this massive rock and the powerhouse built right into this massive rock. Go ahead. I just put that up there. There used to be steamboats on rivers like Coeur d'Alene and so forth. Next. That, of course, is Medellin, where they used to, well, there's mines in the area, although they used to make cement. We go up there to hunt for trilobites when it's open next. This next house was a Kirkland Cutter house, for those that have heard about it. It's right in the middle of town. Who would, you know, we talk about it in Spokane, but this is in the middle next. I was up at Newport, in fact, Sarah was with me, and they had that huge mill. I remembered when I first moved to the Spokane area. This is up next to the Columbia River, Northport, just before you get to Canada. At any rate, I took a couple of pictures and there's nothing really to look at, which is really disappointing. Next. This is an interesting one. You come down the Lake Ponderay. This was, I had been there. There's nothing there now other than you can see where the tailings pond was, or some tailings. This is called Flashy. Actually, it was a fraud. They fixed up all this fancy stuff, hoping to sell it to people not too bright on the New York Stock Exchange. I can think of some other mines like that, the Mascot down near Ketchum area. Go ahead. Kingston. Keep going. Kingston is they're right off the freeway. That's the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River. That's where the snake pit is.
Right.
Some of you are well aware of it. That's Pritchard. He was the one that discovered gold. Remember, the first that helped bring people to Spokane area was gold up in Murray area. Next. It was the Northern Pacific. You look at that, up $20 to $10,000, $1.75 per pan. Nuggets from $50 to $200. They oversold the place, but Northern Pacific didn't care. They wanted customers. This is now Eagle City next. This is the late 1880s. I still remember the sawmill up at Eagle next. Today, this is what it looks like. Next. I belong to a group, Northwest Gold Prospectors Association, and you can still pan up there, but not in that specific area. But at any rate, there's still gold up there. Eagle City next. And later on, it was dredged next. Okay, keep going. This one I pointed out. These are called giants. They would take, you know, it says there, I think 4 inches of water and break it down to an inch. You get about 400 pounds per square inch. It would just knock the heck out of boulders. They used to do that all over the West. California hauled it at first because it's so destructive. But at any rate, there are some places that you can still see this massive nozzle. Of course, one of my favorite places, I make it about once a year, is Murray. That is a museum. That's only one part of it. It's now 2 or 3 parts. It was built by an individual. There at the spray pull in, you can get reasonably good meals. Next. That's what Murray looked like. You can see it was pretty well populated. Across the street is the famous bedroom gold mine. I was quite familiar with it. I heard about it when I was a kid, where there's somebody bought a house up there. They said, "Don't you know you're a good 20 feet above the gold? Or the gold is down." And so they tore out the bedroom, and you can go in. Go next. So I had it.
Is that still in Murray?
You can go in across the street and see where this mine was. I remember the sluice box coming out of the bedroom. But at any rate, it's down. It's got plastic over. Well, I guess you can't walk on it now, but you can look down there. They've got a light on it. There was some guy, what is now the parking lot, had a small mine like that, and I had some kids and others adults with me, and at the end of the season, they let the kids go pick out the little gold that was still left in the system. But that was one of the problems. Okay, next. This is one of my favorite. If you look on, this is an old, about 1903 map of the Murray area. And there's a bunch of other towns past Murray. Raven. Littlefield. Yep, that's right. Anyway, on the road that goes from Murray down to, well, it goes to Delta, and then you pick up the highway again, was a place, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Third. It was one time called Myrtle, Thiard, And I had looked for this over the years, for about 5, 6 years. I thought I'd help discover my own town. And you can see it's on a sharp curve. I sent Sierra up to a wild goose chase. But anyway, when I walked down the road, keep going. Anyway, until I actually found a sign saying Steer Gulch, and they, well, you can see they have really dug it up. In fact, she was down in one of the holes so deep, she couldn't see me. So that gives you an idea. Next. But this is what I found. That is some kind of device, obviously a drag. I'm going to tell the museum that's open tomorrow where it is. And, if I was younger, I'd have retrieved it. I didn't go down there, although now I did find the old road. It comes up gradually and does hit the regular road, so I could have walked it. Okay, next. At the end of the road is Delta. It used to be an old building that had Delta written on it, so you could, I guess, see it from an airplane. So now it's just junk. Somebody showed me this area years ago, and we did a little panning on this particular stream. I built my own sluice box based on something that I had seen in Alaska, myself and another person. And anyway, we went and started, things were different, but anyway, we weren't having any luck at all. Finally, some guy comes up with a 6-shooter on his thing, said we were jumping his claim. One of the other, these were faculty, with me asked him, what makes it yours? The 6-shooter was good enough for me, but unfortunately the third person calmed him down before it got serious. And we talked him into showing us his claim, and he showed us a nice coffee can with black sand, all kinds of little gold nuggets at the bottom. And then later on, a couple of ladies had the same site, and they had small equipment, and there's still some panning going on up there. So there's gold in them. I just threw that up there, go next. Anyway, that's going up to Burke. There are a couple of towns, Big Bear, but I love those next. Outhouses right over the stream. This is Burke in the early days. The Hercules is down there at the end on the left-hand side, where I found a big pile of ore. That one might have come from it, it might not have. But anyway, I had a guest speaker that spoke on Burke, so I'm not going to spend much time with it. There's always, me, lots of things to do. Keep going. Keep going. That's Wardner. Many of you probably haven't heard of it. If you take the gondola up to Silver Mountain, I still prefer the name of Jackass, but that, I used to ski up there, but Madison Street Avenue doesn't, I guess it just doesn't fit the, I like Jackass because the reason was, it's well known, Noah Kellogg lost his Jackass. Several days later, he found it, and that's where the Great Bunker Hill. But Wardner, so the trouble is 2 different people rough staked him. And so there was a big court fight. Wardner, when everybody was fighting, put a sign on the ground, I claim the waters of this stream and all the tributaries thereof. Well, you can't run a smelter, and that's what you need when you get in silver, lead, and so forth. Gold is one of the few minerals that does not combine within it. Well, there's a couple of rare things. I can't even pronounce the names, but it's pretty rare. So when you get gold, it's surrounded by quartz. All you have to do is crush up the quartz. The quartz is light. It washes off and leaves the gold. Well, you can't do that. You can get rid of the quartz and the non-materials you don't want. And now you've got some ore, but you have to separate it. Fortunately, they all have different melting points, lead, zincs, antimony, even arsenic. I thought such a lot. But at any rate, next, it was kind of a slum, I thought. That's the initial point up there by Wardner at the end of the Wardner. Keep going, next gold, where they found it. If you go through central Idaho, this is one of my favorite areas, the Yankee Fork. This is up above Sun Valley, between Stanley and Chalice. Anyway, this is one of the two real good, well actually I can think of three, dredges. You can go through this, it's run by the state of Idaho. Next. The other one you'll see later, and there's a great one up like Fairbanks, number 4 or something like that. Huge thing. There are two towns up the Yankee Fork, just past the dredge, Custer and Bonanza. Custer, I don't have a really good picture, that's part of Custer, but there are several buildings. Springs me to another thing. They had a nice museum. Someone during the winter, this is a complete ghost town, no one lives there, got in and stole a lot of stuff from them. I live off of the little Spokane. I have my own little private stream. Well, not mine. But at any rate, there was a farm museum about a mile from me. And several years, I kept thinking, I need to go. I'd already stopped teaching Northwest history. Otherwise, I'd have taken them there. At any rate, or had to go there and report on it or something. But at any rate, a few years ago, someone broke into that before I got to see it. I don't know if it's open. I know it's there, but again, it's stolen. That leads me to another area. When I was in Cyprus a few years ago, I saw a horrible tape. I'd like to get a copy of it. Being financed by millionaires, today probably billionaires, but millionaires anyway. We'll keep it at that for now. They were going into museums in small towns and so on, paying them to steal some of the artifacts. In fact, it was an instructor friend of mine, her husband, or her brother was no good. At any rate, he went out on one of these to loot this site. Remember, we're talking about Roman, Greek ruins, that kind of thing, thousands of years old. He said the guys had guns and so on and so forth. Fortunately, they didn't end up looting anything that day, but although he had things that obviously had been looted. But from the show that I saw, this is a worldwide thing, and so I want to, anyway, that's the downward of this kind of thing. Next. Go ahead. Next. Oh, okay, this is, they first discovered gold at Pierce City. I have a, I think it's supposed to be a copy of the courthouse, which would have been the first courthouse covering all of eastern Washington and northern Idaho. But eventually, that's where the gold got started. Again, it was all, well, it was all gold, being washed out of the streams. But this is Warren. Next, they found gold in Warren, fabulous Florence. And eventually, they worked their way down the Boise Basin, which I'll cover in a few minutes, and Silver City. But if you take the road that goes to Sun Valley, up above the Galena Pass are two of my favorite towns. I have written some papers on them. Well, I won't go into it, but they had about 800 people. There were two towns. Vienna was one of them. It looked like Vienna was Vienna. And Sawtooth City was the other one. Next. Anyway, they had a newspaper, there were hotels, 14 saloons, you know, the usual. Okay, This is my book that I wrote, so I'm not going to talk about it, but anyway, Galena was the first town in the whole Wood River Valley. My aunt owned it later on, which is now a lodge run by the county. And a great cross country. In fact, when snow, the very first year that Sun Valley was built, there wasn't enough snow, and they took people up to Galena, got an old Model A or something, and made a rope tow. Of course, most Americans couldn't ski anyway. Sun Valley is so important. There's so much history of that area because of the first ski school, one of the first destination resorts, and in fact, our first Olympic winner came from, and it was a female, Gretchen, and she, of course, they poo-pooed her and all the rest, and she won gold anyway. Next. That's, oh. Hit that thing to make it big. This is one you're not going to find. It's a true ghost town. Will that get big if you get that? I guess not. Well, that's all right. Anyway, way up. This one you won't find. It's Boulder City. It's almost a glacial cirque between Sun Valley and Galena. Anyways, way up there in the mountains. I beat the heck out of my car trying to get there. Finally decided I was getting scratched up trying to cross a stream, and I turned around. Fortunately, some young kids in a pickup were going up there, and we got in the back of the pickup and went up. Of course, we could walk down, but you can see how people got up, sometimes 9,000 feet, to find these places. Unbelievable. Thanks. This one I want to mention, in Ketchum, these wagons that used to carry the mineral, the rock, are still there, and they're in a special place. They have this big parade up in Sun Valley, and the final thing they do is to bring down these wagons. Those wheels, the big ones, are about 6 feet tall, 5 to 6 feet. Meanwhile, somebody stands on a little platform hanging on, especially, they bring it up over one of the hills there in just outside of Ketchum, well, right next to Sun Valley, and he's hanging on to the brake. But at any rate, those are still seen in a next. This is the second best ghost town in Idaho, Placerville. Get down the Boise Basin, there are a lot of Placerville, Centerville, and so forth. I did an archaeological dig here for the Forest Service. You know, that's the big thing right now is to kill the federal government. The federal government's done a wonderful job trying to preserve historical sites. I spent several decades just trying to save sites like Hell's Canyon, Salmon, and so on and so forth. But at any rate, there's a few people live there, but in those buildings are museums. It was a program called Partners in Time. I'm sure if they have now, it's been, they'll get rid of it. But at any rate, we worked for a week for the ecologists. Actually, we were looking at a site. They thought it might have been a Chinese brewery. Actually, where the diggings were about 3 miles out of town, all the Chinese lived in this one building. Says walking back and forth every day. At any rate, our job was to help excavate it. We were not paid. We did our own camping. They did put on a dinner for us. By the way, I did about 5 of these in the Southwest. In that case, it was through the Sierra Club, who one of the leaders went to one of the famous sites in the Southwest, and the place was just falling apart, and offered the club's service. And so they used to have, I said I did about 5 of them in Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. In that case, we paid the Sierra Club. That was food. We did the cooking. They had the menus. The Park Service or BLM did put on a dinner for us. Usually Wednesday was off, but, or a half a day, sometimes we volunteered to work a half a day. There were volunteers who have gone through a training school, archaeologists that helped, showed us around. It was a wonderful experience. That's Placerville. Keep going. Okay, this is Iowa City. There are a lot better pictures, unfortunately. As I said, this is a partial. People live there. Many of the original buildings are there. The courthouse. Anything you see in the movies, you got the ritual.
Okay.
Anyway, the old behind it is the first territorial next prison. Okay, it's out of order, but they had redone the building. That's Pierce, Idaho. I had the original picture with it's about 65, I think. That was
Go
a lot
to
of
the right.
weakness.
Scroll down.
You say about 65?
65.
The second type of mining, one that doesn't use water, of course, is hard rock mining. There's several other terms for it. Sometimes, after they were done with the gold, they would look for the mother lode, that is the rock where it came from. But, however, when you got to the silver, the lead, it was all hard rock mining. Coming down the east side of Idaho is Leesburg. There was Grantsville also. You'll notice there are a lot of southern names. Remember, this is the 1860s. And you'd gone through the wars and they were Confederate, your home destroyed, you went to Idaho. Two towns next. The two towns showing, that's, as I said, one of the best ghost towns. But the whole valley, you can see that here's some ruins farther down the valley. Again, you can see there people have been digging all over the place next. This is the fourth best ghost town, Bay Horse. It's just north of Chalice, not too far in. Next. There's a picture here, explains the mill and how a mill works. When we went up there with a friend who was leading a little tour, there were some people digging for bottles illegally. They said they had permission. They had no permission. The state since has taken over that site to protect it. That's the problem. Many of these great sites, if you do nothing, they get looted. That's the mine. I know this is a paper in my book, my second book that I haven't written yet. Well, I've written part of it. Go next. This is one area you should think about going, and that is Mackay, Idaho. It was a copper region. There is a self-tour that you can drive way up on the mountain, and I've got great pictures. They had a smelter. You can go in the old mill. But anyway, you can go up inside the mountains. There were several ghost towns next. White Knob was one of them. There were smelters. I found where the smelters were next. This basically, if I had to do it over again, I put some in at the last minute. Anyway, when you come down to go to Sun Valley from Chalice, is a small town, Clayton. I've been up the mine, but they had a small smelter there next. There's one, that's all silver, 217,000, I don't know if that's dollars or what. Silver at that time was about 90 cents an ounce. Gold is around 30 some. In fact, I remember those days. Next. This is from the road, but you can see that where that dark area next to the river was where the smelter was. And you can find the old smelter ruins. Next. Now we're going to switch over to Montana. This is a place called Princeton. It's near Anaconda. Next. You can see it's a big kind of cirque area with a mine. And you can see up on the left-hand side was the main mine. Next. Most of the best towns in Montana, mining towns, think of Dillon and go either left or right. Nevada City, next, Bannock. Bannock was the first capital, Nevada City was second, Virginia City was, and finally Helena next, Chinese. They moved some buildings. This is, I said a minute ago.
Courthouse?
The Sonic Temple.
Pardon me?
The Sonic Temple.
Oh, yeah, right. Keep going. These are, the state operates these. They've kept it pretty much as it is. Next. Next. Okay, these two, normally I don't talk about California, but the best ghost town, I think, in California is Bodie. It's on the foothills in Southern California near the Nevada border. Now, there's all the mining towns up there north, in Northern California. These are in Southern California. Next. You can see they kept it pretty much as it is. These are true ghost towns. Next. This is kind of an afterthought. This was the most recent and the last of the great gold rushes. Thunder Mountain. It's in central Idaho. Next. There's an example of a store and so forth. But landslide came down. This is the town of Roosevelt. And next. Anyway, it flooded out. It was one of the most interesting sights because it looked like there was a mountain of solid gold. Well, the outer layer had pretty good gold in it. And it was going to be the biggest, and of course everyone was trying to get the railroad to go there. They did extend some railroads and so on. But people were so wild to get to the gold, they went out in the middle of the winter. Meanwhile, it took them days before they could get supplies up from the north, from Grangeville. Eventually, a dog sled in late April was able to make it because these guys were, starving. But they would come and claim land with 4 feet of snow. Next. Magic of gold certainly made people crazy. Okay, next, that's Virginia City, Nevada. There are other towns in the area next. This is a true tourist ghost town. Of course, people live there next. Mackay, he had something to do with that mining area, Mackay, Idaho. Next. This is one of my favorite shots. Atlanta, coming up from Boise, there was a trail that went over the mountains. You can see what the mountains look like, and you came out up around Redfish Lake. By the way, that's one of the most beautiful areas of Idaho if you come from Sun Valley and come from the north. At any rate, back there, they want to do some mining up there now, but land, it's not a ghost town, it's a semi, but it's about as isolated as you can get. Next. That's what Atlanta looked like. Again, you can see the got a couple here down near Baker. If you go up in the mountains, you'll come to, it's just the term, taking my tongue, Sumter. And they've got a little train, of course I like train rides. Next. Here they also have one of the great dredges. So there are two, one in Idaho, one in Oregon, and of course one in Alaska. Next. Okay, this example, gold mining. Next. Here's your hard rock mining. I wanted to finish with this just short piece. Anyway, that's a 4-pound jack, 4-pound hammer. Remember, they're going up because they want the stuff to fall down. So you're pounding this about 1 pound every second, 3,600 hits an hour, 10 hours a day, mostly 7 days a week. Now, the other one was a 8-pound hammer with 2 people, where one guy would turn it a little bit, he'd hit it, and so on and so forth. They could drill in 15 minutes about 40 inches through solid rock. Next. Oh, this one, I put in the last one. This is Gilmore. It's also over there in eastern Idaho. Now they're selling lots like mad. Next. There's not much left. But there are these wonderful beehive to produce charcoal for the smelter. There's a smelter. I've written a paper on it. What I like to do, and I found an old document on the internet, done in the 1800s, 1887, and so then I never heard of Nicolay. I wrote a paper on it. Anyway, next. This is the last one. Almost the last slide. One of the places I found, again, you can see they put up a sign. This was a small town pond, about 100 people. They had a small smelter there. I did find it, but and there are a lot of tin cans and things like that, but nothing in the city. Next. I just threw that one in. That's Mount Bora, Idaho's highest peak, because in many of these areas there is wonderful scenery to be seen. You can make a whole week out of it, or 2 or 3 days. That area that's all smoothed out there, that was from the Chalice earthquake. The land, the mountains went up, the valley dropped. Some areas that's about 9 feet. A couple of kids were killed in Chalice where the bricks came down from an old building. Next. Finally, this picture's not very good, it's the best I could find. That used to be the City Hall of Boise. Typical 1890s building. Of course, they tore it down. What did they put up? A drugstore. One-story drugstore, nothing your ordinary drugstore. They should have had coffee in there, lunch areas, a Boise museum. I'm very critical of museums. I'll give one example. In 1870, which was the first census in Idaho, about 45% of the population were Chinese. Originally, they tried to keep the Chinese out, but once the whites had gotten all the gold they wanted, they were only too happy to sell the Chinese, who could, in fact, make a profit. By the way, the Chinese ate better than they did because they had their vegetable gardens, which actually helped supply the other cities. But the State Museum, which is in Boise, had an area this big, a big bar. I have some of the same artifacts they did. Anyway, there's a wonderful collection. Now it's about this size. I'm also very critical of our own if you want to see a good museum, see the ones that he mentions. The new one's going to open up in Coeur d'Alene. They've had one, but certainly the one out in the Valley Museum. That's where you really see the local industry. That should be the one more slide. That's after a floating trip in Utah. That's actually the oldest village. There's two very old cabins in Boise that date back to the very original ones. And we had it all done, but anyway, had my mother take that picture. It's the only good picture I've ever had. Anyway, that's basically it. But the thing is to get out. Look at these areas. Dillon, Montana, if you're going to Montana, the ghost towns are on both sides. There are many other ones too. Go up and take that loop in Canada if you haven't. Get one of these books. I'm going to sell a couple of the, or bring out a couple of some of the other states that I want to use one more time. Oregon, Montana I hardly use. But find your own ghost towns, but take your kids, make a day of it. Most of these up there, Chesaw, even Molson, you can do it a good day, but stay overnight in some of the bigger towns. Anyway, that's it. Yeah. Well, they are finding gold so fine you need a magnifying glass in Nevada. Of course, open pit. The problem is they're getting down to water level. There's not a lot of water in Nevada. It's sometimes we call this mining water. It's not coming back. And in fact, I just read a few minutes ago up around Atlanta, they're talking, or what? The best ghost town was somehow, we missed the slides. But anyway, down in Silver City, which is down in Whitey County. Whitey County is bigger than Connecticut and Rhode Island. About 10,000 people there, and they all live up near Homedale, Marsing, on the river. Wild horses, beautiful canyons. At any rate, it's a complete ghost town because it snowed in during the winter.
Now, does the government control who can go in and get, or do you use it privately owned land?
Well, there, like, unfortunately, there are some private properties in Silver City now, but that's a good question. In the case of Bay Horse, it was private and no one was watching it. And as I said, people were stealing from it, but the state just took it over shortly afterwards. I know we complained or let the state know.
So it really isn't wise just to go up and start.
Well, most of these, all the ones I've looked at, well, they're along the side of the road, there's not much there. But places like Silver City, they're open. Usually the BLM tries to get control, and they'll put up interpretive signs. They've done a wonderful job. One of the best things. This is over 25 pages done by the state of Idaho. This happens to be on the Viola Mine, which is what I put the whole paper on. But they've done dozens of these things, so it has a state historical society. And they've done a good job in publishing this history and trying to save it.
We've kind of come to our midnight hour, and I see some people already needing to leave. So, Pete, so we try to recognize our speakers. If you're not a member, you get a couple of additions of the including our webinar. If you are a member, we give you a little Joe pin, and you become part of an elite club with requiring 25% have Joe pins Constitution. And he's from Sandpoint. And it's going to be pretty special to have him in costume and here to entertain us. So, hope you all come learn a little bit more about James Casson and his wife Dolly. Now we're going to ask the coroner to supply Dolly's favorite dessert. Ice cream is brand new tonight, so it's ice cream strawberries. All right. So, that's the next week.